Atiku and opposition leaders reject Tinubu's emergency rule in Rivers. Former Vice President Atiku Abubakar and other opposition leaders have strongly condemned President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's declaration of a state of emergency in Rivers State. They have demanded an immediate reversal, calling it unconstitutional and a threat to democracy. At a press conference held today at the Shehu Musa Yar'Adua Center in Abuja, Atiku, alongside former Kaduna State Governor Nasir El-Rufai, former Imo State Governor Emeka Ihedioha, and other political figures criticized the suspension of Rivers State Governor Siminalayi Fubara, his deputy Ngozi Odu, and all members of the State House of Assembly. In a national broadcast on Tuesday, President Bola Tinubu announced the suspension and appointed retired Chief of Naval Staff Vice Admiral Ibok Ete Ekwe Ibas as the sole administrator of the state. During the press conference, the opposition leaders described Tinubu's move as an attempt to seize control of Rivers State undemocratically. We, a cross-section of leaders and political stakeholders, have come together to address the dangerous and unconstitutional actions taken by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. They said, this action is not only unlawful but a clear attempt to subvert democracy. They argue that the crisis in Rivers State did not justify an emergency declaration. They insisted that Governor Fubara had been working to implement the recent Supreme Court ruling on the political situation in the state, despite provocations from rivals. The text of the press conference reads in full. Joint press conference by concerned leaders and political stakeholders in Nigeria on the unconstitutional declaration of a state of emergency in Rivers State by the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Fellow Nigerians, we, a cross-section of leaders and political stakeholders from across the country, have come together to address the dangerous and unconstitutional actions taken by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, GCFR, on March 18, 2025, to wit, the declaration of a state of emergency in Rivers State and the illegal suspension of the governor, deputy governor, and the State House of Assembly. This action is not only unlawful but a clear attempt to subvert democracy and impose federal control over a duly elected state government. We strongly condemn this development and call on all Nigerians of good conscience to resist this brazen assault and unconstitutional governance. Seemingly, Mr. President's illegal and unconstitutional proclamation was driven by the protracted, insidious political crisis in Rivers State, culminating in the recent ruling of the Supreme Court. Ordinarily, all parties involved would have been expected to follow laid-down procedures motivated by good faith to quickly implement the judgment of the highest court of the land. We note that Governor Fubara's disposition is geared towards full implementation of the ruling of the Supreme Court, despite provocative statements from opposing quarters. It is also notable that Mr. President's broadcast to the nation on 18th March 2025 betrayed his bias and is infra-dig of the sophisticated communication expected from the highest office in the land. By so doing, the president dragged himself and his highly exalted office into the arena of the political brawl, therefore denigrating his high office through inelegant language, predisposed excessiveness, and malignant deportment. The constitutional violations. 1. Illegal removal of governor and state assembly. The Nigerian Constitution does not empower the president to remove an elected governor, deputy governor, or state assembly under any circumstances. The procedure for removing a governor is clearly outlined in Section 188 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, 1999, as amended, through an impeachment process initiated by the State House of Assembly, not by presidential proclamation. 2. Misuse of Section 305 on state of emergency. Section 305 of the Constitution allows the President to declare a state of emergency only in extreme cases where public safety, national security, or Nigerian sovereignty is at serious risk. However, it does not grant him the power to suspend elected officials or to demolish democratic structures as is currently being attempted. Furthermore, Section 305 of 1 states that any proclamation of emergency is subject to the provisions of the Constitution, meaning it cannot override the tenure and removal procedures of a governor. 3. Failure to meet constitutional requirements for emergency rule. The conditions under Section 305 of 3 for declaring a state of emergency include war or extended aggression, breakdown of public order and safety, natural disaster, or any other grave emergency threatening Nigerians' corporate existence. None of these conditions exist in current circumstances in Rivers State. There is no war, no widespread violence, and no breakdown of law and order warranting emergency rule. Fourthly, failure to follow due process, even if an emergency declaration were valid, which is not, it will still require a two-thirds majority approval of all members of the National Assembly, that is, at least 72 senators and 240 members of the House of Representatives. If the approval is not secured, the proclamation must automatically cease to have effect. Fifthly, alternative legal avenues were ignored. If the issues was the dysfunction of the Rivers State House of Assembly, the President could have encouraged the National Assembly to intervene under Section 11 of the Constitution. However, even under such an intervention, the governor and deputy governor cannot be removed by any arm of government except through constitutional means, as the Proviso to S clearly provides. A manufactured crisis for political control. The state of emergency declaration is not about security, it is about power. The disagreement within Rivers State stemmed from the defection of 27 assembly members from the PDP to the APC, their loss of seats under constitutional provisions, and the subsequent political maneuvering to undermine the governor's mandate. Rather than allowing the law to take its course, the federal government has engineered a crisis to justify this unconstitutional action. The excuse of pipeline vandalism, an issue squarely under the control of the federal security agencies and privately contracted security firms, is laughable. If security breaches are the concern, the first question should be who controls the police, the military, and the DSS, the governor or the president? Our demand and call to action. Firstly, immediate reversal. We call on President Bola Tinubu to immediately revoke this unconstitutional proclamation and reinstate the elected governor, deputy governor, and the State Assembly of Rivers State. Secondly, National Assembly's rejection. We call on patriotic senators and representatives to vote against this illegal action when it comes before them for approval. The National Assembly must not be used to legitimize an unconstitutional power grab. Thirdly, judicial intervention. We urge the judiciary to act swiftly in striking down this proclamation, as it sets a dangerous precedent that could be used to arbitrarily remove any governor in future. Fourthly, Nigerians must defend democracy. We call on all civil society organizations, political groups, and Nigerians of good conscience to stand firm in the defense of this democracy that we have all toiled to build. Rivers State is not a conquered territory, and Nigeria is not a dictatorship requiring the replacement of an elected governor with a military administration. In conclusion, a peaceful Niger Delta is critical to the economic health and stability of Nigeria. The federal government should not manufacture political crises that could disrupt this fragile stability. We must never allow personal political interest to override the principles of federalism, democracy, and constitutional governance. This is not just about Rivers State. It is about the future of Nigeria's democracy.